In today's tutorial, we're going to take a closer look at the custom action feature on Alloy. Now on Alloy, we support over 270 connectors, but there are certain times where some connectors may not have certain endpoints that you need to support. And using our custom action feature, you can add support for those endpoints as long as they are public APIs. You can simply add support for those endpoints using Alloy's custom action feature. And so, for example, if you think about like Shopify, right? So Shopify has got a gift card program, but we do not support like gift card endpoints on the Alloy embedded app, right? And you can simply use custom action to add support for those gift card endpoints within Alloy. But in today's tutorial, we're going to demo how you can add a retrieve orders endpoint, a retrieve single order endpoint, and a create a customer endpoint in Shopify connector within Alloy. So let's get into it. So I'm going to pull up my embedded dashboard right here. I'm going to come into my embedded dashboard and I am going to click on new integration. And when I click on new integration, I'm going to search for Shopify, right? So, and it's also important to note that you're going to need the docs to follow along with this tutorial. So I'm going to open up my Shopify integration and I'm going to click on new workflow. So this is going to bring me into the workflow editor and we're going to start off with a trigger. Now a trigger simply helps you to kickstart your workflow, right? And I'm going to use the uninstallation trigger here. Now with the uninstallation trigger, this simply means that when a user installs our integration, the workflow is going to start immediately. So I'm going to click done and I'm going to drag the Shopify connector in here as well. Now with the Shopify connector in here, I can come to select an action. So once I click on this input, you're going to see this sidebar pop up. Now with this sidebar, I'm going to go into create custom action, right? And you can see we've already added your shop subdomain in here. We've also added Shopify's APIs as well that we're going to be pinging. And you can simply just add the endpoint that you would like to support. Right, and so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my Shopify store from within Alloy. So remember this, you've already created, you should have already created this Shopify account or connected the Shopify account to your Alloy account. So I'm going to select the account and then I'm going to go into customer right here. So the first thing is that we want to retrieve all orders, right? So let me search for the orders documentation for Shopify. So let's pull that up. And remember, I'm using the REST APIs here. So in here, I can see that I need to make a request to /orders.json to get all of the orders within my store. So I'm going to come back into the embedded workflow and I'm going to say /orders.json. And we can test that out. If I click on the send request button, let's see what happens. And once I click on the send request button, you can see that it shows me all of the orders that have been created within my store, right? And I can also decide that I want to retrieve a single order as well. And we support variables within the request URL. So if I pull down here the request URL parameters, I can call this order ID. And I can actually, so let's go back into the documentation. To retrieve a specific order, so let's come in here. We need to call /orders/the_id.json. So with that information, I can come back into my workflow editor and I can say /orders and I can say /order_id and .json, right? Let me make sure that that's correct. So go back into order, we have /orders/order_id.json, so which is exactly what we've got here. And so I can simply pull up, let me look for an order ID here, right? So I can use this, for example, and I can add the value here. So remember, you could use a variable connector right before the Shopify connector and pass that variable into this request URL from here. So I'm simply going to add code the value here, and I'm going to click on send request. And this should pull up information only for this order, right? And which is exactly what we can see here. So we can see the order ID ends in 208, just like we've got in here. Now with all of that done, let's also see how we can, and so I'm going to save this, right? I'm going to save this and I'm going to click say retrieve a specific order. And I can say gets a single order from Shopify. I can click on done, and this would save this this action, this custom action, right? And you can see the request parameters has already also been added here, where we've got order ID as a configurable parameter. And I can click on configurable by user if I want my end user to be able to pass in their own order ID during this workflow. And I can click on next and make sure that everything works correctly, and show sample output data. It just shows you what your sample is going to look like, and you can click on done. And lastly, I can actually stream all of this back to my own application using webhooks. But to round up this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do this with a post request instead. So come back to select action, and we're going to edit what we've already created before. Now, while you're building your workflow, if you want to, select the custom action that you've already created, you can come into custom actions. I've created a bunch of custom actions here, but this is the one that we just created, right? Which is retrieve a specific order. So rather than using any of the endpoints that we already support, right, you can simply come into custom actions, which are custom actions that you've created, and then select your custom action from in here. All right, so next I'm going to show you how to create another custom action, but this time around we're going to be creating a customer within our Shopify account. So I'm going to switch this over to a post request, and I'm going to go into the documentation again. I'm going to search for customers, right? So customer, go into the docs. Now within the docs, you can see create a customer, and for us to create a customer, we need to call this /customers.json endpoint on Shopify. So I'm going to come back into my Alloy dashboard here, and I'm going to say /customers.json, and I need to pass a body to it. And you can see here on Alloy, we also support the GraphQL queries as well. So the Shopify APIs allows you to also make GraphQL queries. And if you decide that you want to use GraphQL with Alloy, that is also completely possible. Simply click on GraphQL, and you would have this editor where you can put your GraphQL queries in. But for this tutorial, we're going to stick with using the REST APIs, and we're going to pass in some JSON in here. So I'm going to come back into this editor, and I'm going to go to customers. Now, this is the format of the data that the endpoint expects, right? So I'm simply going to copy that, copy all of that. And let's use a JSON formatter just to make this look a little nicer. Paste that in, and I'm going to click on format /beautify, and I'm simply going to copy this just so that, when we're working with the data, it's a lot more clearer and neater. Okay, so we've pasted our data in here, and let's click the send request button. So we click send request. And you can see we've got an error from the API. So email has already been taken, phone has already been taken, and we can actually fix that, right? So if I add let's say I add a +5 here, and let's switch this out for, let's say 9. And let's make a request again. Click send request. This time around, we can see that the customer is actually created on Shopify. Now remember that all of these hard-coded values that we've passed in here, you can also do the same thing using variables, right? But simply this is demonstrating the power of Alloy's custom action feature for you to add support for any endpoint that we do not support out of the box.